Hey guys, you're watching Vol. It's about time we did another discussion and analysis on an Infinity faction, and more specifically an Infinity Sectorial. I've been playing a lot of Combined Army recently, and recently bought the Unidron's box set, which has allowed me to branch out more thoroughly into the Onyx Contact Force. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Going to go through each of the unit profiles in the faction. I'm going to discuss them at a fair bit of length, and if you want to stick around for the bonus ending of the video, I'll spend some time discussing some army lists as well, and we'll have a chat about it, and feel free to post me a comment. I think probably the first thing I want to say before I get into the analysis myself is that if you guys check out the Infinity forums and you go to the Combined Army area, so here's the forums here, and here's the Combined Army area. It's probably worth going to the thread which says The Joy of Invading Savage Planets, a guide to the Onyx Contact Force, and just reading that first to get an idea of what the generally accepted views of particular units are, and the fairly non-threatening sort of generic descriptions of the units are, because they're going to be pretty thorough. They're going to point a lot of things out, and the content you'll get from my analysis a lot of the time won't be too different from this, but you'll see me sort of talking up units to be better than, you know, normally described, and also talking down to some units, and some people aren't going to like that. But hey, it's Vaulsc. You guys know what you're in for when you watch my videos. But I just want to point out that this content is there. You know, we stand on the shoulders of giants, and I've read this too, and I've actually initially had my views affected by, you know, what the general community thinks. So go nuts, have a look if you haven't already, and if you play Onyx Contact Force and want to know a bit more about them. Okay, so let's get into it. I also want to say that it's really important for me to acknowledge that this Contact Force starter set exists, and a lot of people own it, and a lot of people have gotten into Infinity because of this. And they see, oh, okay, I can buy this box, I can assemble the models, and I can play. And when you first get into a war game, participation is your first sort of goal. And once you have participated, you've mastered that, you want to sort of learn the rules and learn how things really work, so you can participate in a bit more of a, you know, a functional capacity. And then you start to want to win, so you have to start learning more about, you know, what do my abilities do, when should I use them, and then as you develop rivalries with people, you eventually become higher and higher to the highest level of Infinity, where you're thinking about the meta game and you're complaining about which models are good and bad. But I want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of people have this set and they're using these particular models just because they bought this set, and that is perfectly fine. I'm going to be talking about the individual models in here, why I do or don't like them in a wider setting, and I'm also going to write lists for this box later in the video. But I just want to say that just because I talk about a model being good or not very good doesn't mean you should sort of change your opinion on your decision to buy this box set. The models are beautiful, and it allows you to play, and that's what you wanted in the first place. It doesn't mean you should necessarily branch out because I say so or don't say so, but we'll deal with that a bit more later. So if you guys aren't aware already, here's the catalog page on the Infinity website. Go have a look at this if you haven't, if you're looking at getting into the faction, because most importantly it's the models which really sell us all on it. I do want to point out that the Rodok missile launcher came out recently, but I think you have to go to the main Combined Army page for that specifically. Yeah, here he is here. So this is the new Rodok. The date today is the 24th of June 2017, so by the time, you know, this video will be immortalized in YouTube, so if a lot of new models have come out since I've recorded it, well, you'll know why. Just pay attention to that date, as with all of my YouTube videos. Righty then, so Infinity Army. So what you want to do is load up Infinity Army, click on the Combined Army, go down to Onyx Contact Force, this beautiful red logo, and here we are. We've got all of the beautiful icons. To give a couple of preliminary comments, the Onyx Contact Force is a version of the Combined Army where you don't have access to all of the cheap warbands like Datratso, Witch Soldiers, and Pretas, and Ghazis, and Hungaries. So they're missing that, and I find that those specific models are very strong. I use them all the time when I play Vanilla Combined. So you can't use them in Onyx Contact Force. So that's something which makes this force weaker. Also, you don't have access to Mnemonica. There's no Chorontid or Anathematic or Avatar, so you just do not have access to that lieutenant who his ghost goes into the shell of one of your guys and gives him a massive willpower boost. So they don't have that either. Also, this faction does not have any access to smoke grenades, so you can't sort of pair up your MSV with a smoke trick. So those three things in particular actually make Onyx Contact Force quite weak. But they have a couple of things which boost them up to make up for it, and that's the idea of all sectorials, is that they take away some opportunity for value and fill it in with something else, and hopefully bring them back up to that straight level. Some people think that sectorial armies are too powerful. Others think that they're not powerful enough. I think personally it depends on which sectorial you're talking about. In the case of some factions, and I'm not going to say which ones, I think the sectorials are better than the vanilla version, and in other factions the opposite is true. So let's start diving into the units and let's have some fun. So the Imetron is available to Onyx Contact Force, and you can get two of them just like you can in regular Combined. Now, should you take Imetrons? Answer is yes, you should. The only relevant thing I really want to say about Imetrons is that when you're building your army list, I would advise against putting them in your main combat group of 10 orders. Instead, you should put them in your smaller combat group. The reason for that is that you take a little bit of a risk with their deployment using combat drum, where if they both scatter off the table because they fail their physical check and they don't scatter in the right direction, they're just completely off the table, or if your opponent just kills them straight away because you're not going first. What may happen is that you're starting the game in your first turn and you're already down 2 orders, which you could easily have avoided if you'd had some more stability there. And let's say you're going first and they both scatter off the table and you had 2 Imetrons and your opponent spends a command token to reduce your order pool by 2. You've got 6 orders to try and achieve something at the start of the game. If you're going first, you just need to really cripple your opponent, because chances are they'll have the final turn of the game. Most ITS missions are last game round scoring, so that's really, really bad. Or if you're playing a mission like Supplies or Nimbus Zone, where you might want to have first turn to sort of get the objectives before your opponent can get them, well, you've got 6 orders, so it's going to be very difficult to accomplish that, especially when you've got to actually spend orders making willpower checks to do things and they may fail. But if you've got the Imetrons in the second group, you can spend command tokens to bring them in and plug the gaps later. You can also use them to very cheaply bolster that second group. So if you've got one model in group 2 who's only got sort of 4 or 5 orders, you've got a lot of potential in your main group because everything's so expensive, but your second group still gets a lot done. There's a huge difference in an army list between having, say, 14 or 15 orders with a very efficient second group and an army that only has 10 orders. Unless you're playing something like Steel Phalanx or something that really, really does well with one combat group, it's better to have a bit more a balanced list where those secondary orders aren't just redundant, where you're just waiting to sub them into Group 1. Which is why I don't like army lists that have, say, 13 orders and there's nothing in that group of 3 that can accomplish something. Like if you've just got your lieutenant and like a baggage bot and one other cheerleader with a chain rifle, what's the point? But if your group 2 has a hacker for putting up support wear, or if it has a doctor for reviving people with 3 orders, or something like that, or even just one specialist who's going to come out of hidden deployment and actually press some buttons, then that's very, very efficient. And if you're still coming up with army lists which are the former, which just have those redundant orders in them, you're not going to be able to achieve much on the infinity table compared to better players who are actually making more efficient use of their army lists. So yeah, Imetron, definitely worth taking. He is an AI beacon, but unlike Aleph, you don't have any posthumans to take advantage of that little extra bonus of having the posthuman going into the beacon. But hey, it's a small thing, not going to worry about it too much. The Fractar. So the Fractar is really cool. He also is very good looking, or she's also very good looking, depending on how you like to go with the gender. This is the most recent version of the model, but if you bought the starter pack, you'll have the classic combi rifle version, which also looks really cool, I might add. Let's have a look. So yeah, there it is there, right in there. So that's the one I've got. Personally, I run the Spitfire more often than the combi rifle, but that's up to you guys. Main thing about the Fractal is it's got symbiont armor, just like the well, it has the equivalent of symbiont armor and transmutation, just like the Tohar guys, because effectively it's been like a corrupted Tohar. Combined Army have just brought some of the Tohar over to their combination of aliens. But because you you stay alive after taking one wound, this is the kind of drop trooper which you want to take. There's this sort of category of drop troopers which I think of as like the Tohar one. I can't remember what it's called, the Galtarsos I think, and then there's the Fractar, and then there's say the Hakaslam guy, the Rajik, who's got Dogged. Anything that can sort of drop down on the field, survive one shot from a chain rifle or combi rifle, and then start activating and causing damage is going to be a superior drop trooper just for that. Besides that, though, we do have a nanopulsar on the profile, which is actually really cool. Not all drop troopers have a direct template weapon, let alone a nanopulsar, so I really like that. You've got the option for the assault hacking device, which I don't take as often. But I'll also mention that before you take that wound, you've got 4/4 speed, so this is actually a faster drop trooper than, say, the Tiger Soldier or the Akali, for example. Courage can be handy, but other than that, this is a really solid drop trooper. If you are playing in a meta where people aren't protecting against drop troopers well, or the table layouts seem to favor them, then I would definitely recommend the Fractar. You've got them in your starter set, you put them to good use. My preference is the Spitfire profile, because when you're bringing in a drop trooper by landing it or bringing it on the side of the table, that is the range band that you are in the most. So if you take a combi rifle or boarding shotgun, there might be some guys nearby to kill, and that's fine, but you're going to be in a few situations sometimes where you need to be able to shoot longer than 16 inches, even with your drop trooper. So, and with the Spitfire causing more damage in terms of like the damage 14 and the extra dice, I feel it's always better if you're going to be Ramboing and you're going to be spending a lot of points on your model. You want that model to be as efficient as possible. You don't want it to be winning face-to-face rolls only to not crack armor. You want it to be, winning as many face-to-face rolls. You want to be able to split burst. So the Spitfire is optimal in my view. There's no reason why you shouldn't take the other profiles though, and one of my main reasons is that you may not have the special weapons cost for it. There's a lot of other juicy stuff in this faction which requires special weapons, so if that's what's going on, then fine, take the combi rifle or boarding shotgun. That's perfectly fine. Some people like the boarding shotgun just because you might be able to land very close to a bunched up group of guys. I think personally that's dependent on whether you want to risk dropping your guy in, or whether your opponent is liable to leave those troops for you. I think at an extremely high level of play, most opponents are going to be deploying their troops wisely, limiting the number of options you have for a really juicy kill with a boarding shotgun. I don't consider a juicy kill, to be something like, oh, you shoot that auxiliary and you get his aux spot as well. That's nice, but it's not as nice as, say, shooting a cheerleader and there's a Swiss Guard and camo behind it and the lieutenant behind that. I mean, that's just a massive, blowout where the boarding shotgun is golden. The assault hacking device, I don't love it. It does mean he's a specialist. We'll come to some of the other faster, more efficient specialist profiles later in this video, but the reason I don't love it is that it makes him super vulnerable to killer hacking, and as a specialist he's still only willpower 12, so I don't think that's an ideal profile choice. But hey, I mean, if your opponent again likes to play these sort of 10 order lists with just heavy infantry and tags, then maybe he can be actually quite handy, because they might have the tag on the side of the table with suppression fire, I don't know what, and then you come in behind him and you start hacking him or something fun like that. So I think that's just dependent on sort of what kinds of opponents you're up against. But again, looking at this, I think my top pick is the Spitfire, number 2 combi rifle, number 3 boarding shotgun, number 4 the assault hacking device. Great unit though, really love the Fractar. Next up, we got the Medtech Obsidon mechanoids, also known as Dr. Worm. You see Dr. Worm quite a lot, not just in regular combined, but in Onyx, and this is the only choice for Doctor and Engineer. You cannot repair your guys at all unless you have this dude. So that sort of makes him quite commonplace. The reason why I pretty much always include one is not because of that, actually. It's just because the classified objective is so important in ITS. I've been in a lot of situations where I've been able to play well enough to achieve a draw, and the difference is just achieving the classified, and you may not be able to secure the HVT. So being able to complete the classified using your engineer, because he's got decharges, he's able to repair wounds or structure points, or you know, touch the HVT in some special way. Further to that, though, he is 6'4", so he's fast. He's a bit like the Sophatect. The decharges is nice. He's got a knife there. Willpower 14 as a specialist is actually pretty juicy. One other reason why I really favor this guy is because, unlike, you know, a trauma doc or something like that, he's 6'4" speed, easily able to get to the objective quickly, and they're more reliable with the willpower check on willpower 14. The other thing, though, is that there may be a lot of static defense going on in this. If you're taking a link of Rodoks and Unidrons, we're going to be talking about them a lot this video, you might get into a situation where your link team gets busted up right at the end of their turn, and rather than going dogged, you might just go unconscious because you've got a Medtech or a slave drone there. So obviously elsewhere we can pick a 3-point slave drone. It's got mimetism, kind of handy, just like the Pelbots do. And you might just set this guy up next to your defensive point, whether you may have a Noctifer with a missile launcher, a Q drone, or your tags as well. We're going to be talking about the Overdrons and the Xeodrons, so if you're taking one of those, this guy really helps because they've got remote presence. So we'll definitely shout out the Medtech Obsidon. If you recently bought the starter set and you're wondering what to do in branching out, I'm usually just going to say the Overdron and the Xeodrons before you buy too much else. Nexus operatives. By the time this video is like a month or two old, we might actually have a model for this guy. The forums and the videos have shown us some concept art for him, like a bit of a render. Not so much a render, just like the dossier, I should say. But these guys are really, really good, and I don't think that I would find this faction as playable without them. They're really quite important, and almost all of the profiles here are actually really relevant. The only one I don't particularly like is the Spitfire, but we'll talk about this a bit more. The reason why this guy is really worthwhile is that he's your option for a lieutenant that isn't a combat lieutenant. We don't have access to mnemoniker in this, as I said. There are some Morats, but honestly, your list isn't going to be so full of Rodoks and Suryats, I believe, that you've got Morats carrying the lost lieutenant sort of thing, if you know what I'm saying. So having a Nexus operative hanging around the back of the table and surviving is really good. If he does get attacked by some drop trooper or impersonator or whatever, physical 11 but hyperdynamics takes him to 14, so he's just a little bit more survivable as a lieutenant. BTS 3 being nice as well. The BTS also important for him being a hacker. But let's have a look at the profile. So you got your basic 16-point specialist operative combi rifle. Now I love this because this guy can be lieutenant, but he's not necessarily lieutenant. So if you've got two of them, you can have one as a lieutenant, one not, and it still becomes a bit harder for your opponent to reliably commit to an assassination. And he can join the Unidron team. Now, the Unidrons cannot go prone because they're remote, but the Nexus can. So if you're setting up in a building where you kind of want to spread your link team apart because you're worried about template weapons, well, the Nexus can be the link leader, staying somewhere in the middle. It's prone, it's away from enemy fire, and then you can dot the Unidrons around in places where they get total cover. And it just becomes a bit wieldier. It becomes a bit more convenient to deploy a link team if you're doing that. My favorite version of the Nexus is the hacker, and in particular I like to take the lieutenant hacker. And the reason I like to take the lieutenant hacker is that, well, you're spending 5 special weapons points for the hacking device, and he becomes a lieutenant with that. Looking at the other lieutenant options, they all typically cost special weapons points. We can look at the Rodok, who can be lieutenant, but this Rodok, even though it's got no fancy heavy weapon, just a combi rifle and the shotguns, you're still paying 1 whole special weapons point for him to be the lieutenant, whereas the Nexus, well, you get a hacking program and effectively a free lieutenant. Or you can take the absolute smack bang free lieutenant, which is the 16 version of the specialist operative, right? If you do choose to take a hacker, they have a nullifier, which is an extremely rare piece of tech in Infinity. Not many people have a nullifier. A nullifier can be really, really cool, because you could put it down next to maybe one of your Overdrons or Xeodrons, your tag or your Sphinx. Can't be hacked, can't be possessed. You can put it down next to your Unidrons. They can't be hit by technical weapons, so that I think gets around Jammer and Flash Pulse, but gets around them being hacked themselves. But most importantly, it prevents your lieutenant being assassinated by a killer hacker. That's my biggest fear of having my lieutenant there. Killer hacker comes across the table, goes up to one of my repeaters like my Xeodron or my Overdron, and just hacks my lieutenant to death. So what you do is in your first turn you can put up your assisted fire or whatever it is, and then you put the nullifier down. It does stop you from hacking as well, so long as you're willing to accept you can't do any more support wear later in the game, you put it down. Bear in mind, if you do have enough orders in that group, you can move them away from the nullifier's range, put up your program, and then sort of come back again, which is pretty cool. So I really like this guy. Lastly, there is the nanoscreen Spitfire. Don't particularly love this model. The reason why I don't like it is that you get a Xeodron for the same points, and just comparing them directly, the Xeodron's faster. It's got mimetism. The nanoscreen helps, but you can just keep your Xeodron under cover regardless. The Xeodron's got a more powerful weapon in the sense that an HMG or a plasma rifle, typically more suitable for a model you're spending a lot of points on. The Nexus is Blister Skill 12, but the Xeodron can go from 11 to 14 with assisted fire. So I just wouldn't use him for attacking. He's terrible at AOing just by himself as a Spitfire. Okay, I will admit that if you put him in a Unidron link team and you're using your Unidron team aggressively, then sure, you can use him as a point man. He doesn't have to stay in cover because of the nanoscreen. But even if you're doing that, why not just take a Unidron Spitfire and put enhanced fire on him and allow the Unidron to do the work? Because it's got dogged and it's got that enhanced fire and it's got, you know, it's probably cheaper just looking at it as well. What is the Spitfire? 18 points. It's way cheaper. So I rest my case. That is my reason why. You can also put these guys in the Rodok link team as well, and I do like that option because it makes the Rodok's link team cheaper, and we're going to talk about that link team soon. I prefer the Unidron link team, as you guys know and probably will find out again, but if you are going to take the Rodoks, may as well take a Nexus, unless you're going to beef them up with the Legate or the Samaritan, but we'll talk more about the Rodoks soon. So I hope you guys like the Nexus Operative. Hopefully the model's going to be awesome. I'm going to buy 2 as soon as they come out. Availability is 3. I could see myself using 3. If I have that rare game where I use 3, I'm just going to proxy one, but definitely going to buy both of them when they come. Alright, next up is the Shazvasti Tactical Dominance Special Wing Noctifers. And let's close this. So there are 2 available models for these guys, and luckily you know, the combi rifle version could be used for any profile, I guess. So the really funky thing about these guys is that they're modeled to be standing on this awesome little staircase. So here's the missile launcher. And you can also take a version which has a combi rifle, although I sometimes use them as a Spitfire. Where is he? What did we do with him? Here he is, here. There we go. The guy with the Spitfire. So in some ways this model is kind of similar to the Pan-Oceania Hexa, because it's a TO camera marker with 1 wound that starts in the deployment zone, comes with either a Spitfire or a heavy weapon, in this case a missile launcher instead of a sniper rifle. But one of the really significant things about this guy is that he comes with dogged as well. And I can't really overstate the effectiveness of that and the significance of it. The thing is, you're going to be using this guy either very aggressively, by, you know, appearing out of camo marker and going over and actively sort of blasting people with your Spitfire, or maybe your combi rifle. Or you're going to be using them very defensively to hang out at back with this missile launcher and wait for them to move out and then blast them with a missile launcher. And their chance of shooting you back is very low because of your range and your camo and your cover. The thing is, as you're going on a rampage with your orders, Dogged is amazing because it allows you to survive the random chain rifle template, or if you lose a face-to-face roll and get a crit, you can keep going. The worst thing that can happen to you is you spend 4 or 5 orders moving him across the battlefield, get ready to get those juicy kills, and then he just dies. So that's not likely to happen to this guy because he may take a wound and die at the end of the turn, but you can spend the rest of your orders actually clearing up your opponent before that happens, which I think is really, really significant. So I love the Spitfire Noctifer, and I use him a fair bit. I find he's really practical. You can sort of keep him in hidden deployment before he's ready to use, so you're always guaranteed to get an active turn out of him, or maybe sometimes even just ARO out of hidden deployment with the Spitfire. So really awesome. BS12 is nothing to scoff at, but Dogged, just an amazing ability. Don't forget he is a Shazvasti, so that means that your opponent's not going to get points from at the end of the game. So if you're playing Annihilation or a mission where army kill points count, don't forget that. It's really good. Probably the star of the show is the missile launcher, though, and most people agree that this guy's the real deal. The missile launcher is amazing because you spring the trap once you're ready. So if your opponent just moves out with a war core or some cheap cheerleader to press a button, you may not fire him. If they move out with a link team or a tag or something like that, that's when the real fun begins, because with a link team, you shoot at one of the members of the link team, and if you hit, and if they're out of cover, you're hitting on like a 15, so 75% chance, everybody under the template that moved through it during that order gets hit. So it can be absolutely crushing and just a game loss for the player who has that happen to them with their link team. Just purely the threat of having something on the board forces your opponent to spread everything out in the deployment zone and make it more awkward for them moving around. Your opponent may move out with a tag, and then when it gets shot by this thing, it's very hard for the tag to destroy it, although some tags do have a multi-HMG, which potentially can get lucky against this guy and ruin his day, because they will remove Dogged. But the thing is, once you've sprung this guy at the start of their turn, they are going to try to remove him, and even if they're shooting at him with something like an Aquila Guard with HMG or something like that, or an intruder, it's still going to be annoying for them because you've got Dogged. So let's say they shoot at you with, I don't know, something like, let's say an Aquila Guard with HMG. Definitely favored to beat you. They're hitting on 15s, you're hitting on a 12 with one dice. But the thing is, let's say they miss once, hit twice, hit 3 times, sorry, and you roll high enough to avoid one of their hits, so you're taking 2 armor saves. If you pass them both, well, you just go fail guts back into cover, they're unlucky. If you pass one, fail one, well, you're there again, and they have to shoot at you again. So not only do they have to spend another order, but that's yet another possibility that they may lose the face-to-face roll. What if you roll a 10 and the Aquila Guard rolls like an 8, 9, 20, and a 1? Well, the Aquila Guard basically dies there to the missile. If that had been a Hexa Sniper or a Ninja Sniper, well, the Aquila Guard's very good at surviving, just like those 2 armor saves in cover, but against the missile launcher, it's a bit of a different story. He's a bit more likely to go down. The other thing, too, is that if your opponent is, again, shooting back at you, it's just going to take just so much more of the turn to get rid of him. So as I said, he's just a bit more dangerous at defending like that. Don't forget he has an assault pistol as well, so if your opponent does bring something on nearby to where he is, let's say they come on the side of the table with their Tiger Soldier going to suppression fire, and you happen to have a missile launcher there that you didn't want to reveal in hidden deployment because he's at bad range band, then when it comes to your turn, you might sneak past him with your camo marker coming out of hidden deployment and just blast him in the face with an assault pistol. So that guy can be awesome. The hacking device I wouldn't take so much, because the hacking device is something you want to use for support wear and doing a bit of hacking. I should point out that it does allow him to have a sucker punch, so that's better than a normal hacking device, but your Nexus has the sucker punch as well on his hacking device as well. So I don't love this this particular model because there are better options. You can take a Malignos, which we'll talk about soon, which has the benefit of being a specialist and having infiltration. Lastly, the Noctifer Lieutenant. I have actually run this guy before. If you want a safe as houses lieutenant, this is the best lieutenant to take in Onyx. If you have an opponent that keeps beating you because they keep showing up with their drop trooper or their assassin, maybe their impersonator, or their Cameronian or something like that, and they keep killing your lieutenant, you just lose every game that way. Try taking this guy. Obviously, he can't go into hidden deployment because you start and lost a lieutenant, but you can deploy him as a TO camo marker, and your opponent has to discover him and then shoot him. And it's quite hard because they've got to get him out of marker state, and they've got to actually hit him with his TO camo. He does cost 1 special weapons point, and you've got a 24-point model doing nothing for the most of the game. But the thing is, on your last turn, when it doesn't matter if your lieutenant dies, well, you can move him out into a quadrant that you're trying to control, or you can use your lieutenant order to get some shots off and get some kills, because he's pretty good at shooting. And as an ARO piece in the last turn of the game, well, he's got that dogger we talked about, so he's actually pretty good. So I actually really like this lieutenant. I think that in a dedicated sort of, you know what you're doing, you're feeling confident list, you wouldn't take this guy as a lieutenant because the Nexus lieutenant is better. But definitely strong case for this guy. Great, so we talked about the Noctifers. Let's go to the Umbra legates. Again, want to just state for the record that this guy does come with the starter set, so most of you guys will have this guy because he either came up with the combined army starter set, which I bought. So here it is here, just the normal generic combined army starter. He comes with it, but of course that same set is included in the larger Onyx Contact Force list. So let's just go back to Onyx Contact Force here in the drop down menu. Here we go. So what do we think about the Umbra legate? Well, straight away, let's just talk about the fact that there are link teams that he can join. You can take the Unidron link with 4 of them plus the legate. You can even have 1 Nexus, 1 legate, and 3 batroids, Unidrons, or you can put them with the Rodok link team. In the box set, you'll put them with the Rodok link team because that's how it's designed. There's also a case to be made for not putting him with a link team at all. And you can sort of see the case for that. He does come with 4 deployment level 1, so he's sort of moving out ahead of them, and you've got these slowpokes following up behind him. In the case of the Rodoks, well, they're only 4.2 speed. He's 6.2 speed, so he's outpacing them by 2 inches. And if he's deployed, you know, a full 6 inches ahead of them, or whatever's going on there, or 4 inches, or whatever it is, well, it just might take some catching up for them to do, which is kind of annoying. So there is that. If we compare him to somebody like the Umbra Samaritan, he's a bit better at shooting because he's got mimetism, and he also sort of fits in with the Rodoks a bit more because they've all got mimetism there. He does have NWI, so just be careful of shock weapons. For close combat, he's not as good as the Umbra Samaritan, which we're about to talk about, because he's CC21 instead of CC24, but he's got Martial Arts 4 instead of Protheon 4. So the thing about Martial Arts 4 is that against models which are really good at close combat, like say a Myrmidon or a Ninja, you're going to be wanting to choose Martial Arts level 3, because it's really important to have a higher score and actually get a bonus to the dice and avoid a crit and get a crit yourself. But if you're just trying to maximize your damage potential against a weak close combat opponent, then you want to use Martial Arts level 4 for the extra dice. So don't forget about that. But importantly, let's talk about his loadouts, and then more importantly than that, talk about their capability and their role in the army. So a K1 combi rifle is a pretty specialized piece of tech that really is only that relevant if you're shooting something which has got massive armor. I'm talking about at least armor 5. Anything less than that, well, you may as well be blasting them with other things, in my view. K1 combi rifle is going to mean they have to beat damage 12, whereas Spitfires are already damage 14 and so on. Boarding shotgun ignores cover, so again, it's really going to be a matter of cracking the really heavy armored stuff. Now, my argument is that if you really are struggling with that kind of thing, then you might not be using the rest of the faction correctly. The rest of the faction has access to plasma weapons and missile launchers, and you know there's some good close combat in the form of the Umbra Samaritan, which also has a Vorpal close combat weapon. So if you're really thinking, oh gosh, I've got to use the combi rifle to solve that problem, then I think that really you're overlooking the other things in the faction that do that. It can be nice to chuck them in with the Unidrons and have the K1 combi rifle, but don't forget the Unidrons actually have access to that as well. And if you're going to have that kind of link team, then maybe take the K1 combi rifle with Deflector, because that way, as they're moving up the field, if you don't want to use your Nullifier from the Nexus, then the tin bot actually affects the whole team, and you've got a K1 combi rifle just sitting there. And technically, he's actually better at shooting than the Samaritan, because he can have assisted fire to effectively take him to Ballistic Score 14, whereas the Legate, I meant, can only stay at 12. So for that reason, I don't like the K1 combi rifle. The Spitfire is my choice. That's what I would take if I'm playing the Legate, just because I want a really good solid Rambo model who just gets the shooting done. Mimetism, Ballisticals 12 is really good. He's already got 4 deployments, so he's able to get into range bands for the Spitfire appropriately anyway. So that's how I would like to use him. The Hacking Device Plus is probably the most interesting profile, and when I first started playing this guy, that was the profile I used the most. In fact, I've had a bit of experience with this. I've used the Umbra Legate with HD Plus for a number of games. When I was playing Nomads, I used the Custodia for a number of games. But the Hacking Device Plus never really felt convincing to me. The 2 things that are quite special that you can do about it are the white noise and the cyber mask, and I think I'm forgetting some other real benefits of it. But my issue with white noise is that if you're having trouble with an MSV unit in your active turn, you're probably not using the right thing to kill it with. Let's say they've got a NIST sniper. It's a really powerful aero unit with MSV2. Are you really struggling to kill that thing if you've got a Unidron with a plasma sniper in a 5-man link team, or if you've got a Rodok HMG in a 5-man link team? Not really. I mean, those models way outclass the NIST in the active turn. So I don't really feel like you need something like white noise. With Cyber Mask, again, I just don't feel like you really need that. He's not really too worried. I mean, his martial arts gives him stealth. You've got other things with which have got TO state. I mean, if your plan is to move a Rambo around their side of the table, maybe you should be running a Sphinx list, because that's got a Spitfire at least, and to get over there and start hacking them, I mean, you just make yourself vulnerable to killer hackers and things like that. So, yet again, I mean, the Cyber Mask helps them to avoid killer hacking, but you're solving a problem that you yourself have created. You don't even have to have that liability there in the first place. Would you want this guy to be your lieutenant? Well, again, there's no chain of command, there's no mnemonica. The Morats probably aren't going to help you that much because there's not going to be enough of them in most lists. So having a lieutenant, which is really a combat lieutenant, it just isn't really my cup of tea, to be honest with you. You might have him safely tucked into the link team, but again, I just think it's too much of a risk. So with link teams, obviously in the starter set you're going to put them with the Rodoks, that's fine. I quite like the link team where you've got 1 Nexus, 1 Umbra, and 3 batroids, because it makes the team quite efficient with capability. But overall, having thought about this a fair bit, I personally think there are slightly stronger options than this guy in the overall Onyx Theme Force list, and I actually have moved away from taking him altogether, just because when you try to figure out what role he's going to do for you and what capability your list has, I feel that you can build better lists that don't have this guy compared to the ones that do have him. We're going to be building some lists later in this video, so stick around for that, but for now I'm just going to move on to the Umbra Samaritan. And the Umbra Samaritan is a model that I find a little bit more interesting than the Legate in the context of the Onyx Contact Force. So first thing to say is that he's just an absolutely spanking model. He's just really awesome. Really cool looking, so evil, and you know, he's actually quite well balanced despite the way he looks, so he doesn't fall over that much, but everyone loves the way he looks. In Vanilla Combined, I think he has a place. I think you can play him. I just like Shishkin a little bit better, and you guys can see the other video on my page where I discuss them both in a lot of detail. Interestingly enough, this guy gives you the opportunity to link with the Rodoks, and because he's got super jump and the Rodoks have super jump, you might find situations where they can all jump onto a building as a team, so he fits in a bit better than the Legate does. There's a very interesting link team that he can create with the Xeodron batroids, and I think I'll talk about that a bit more when we get to the Xeodron batroid section where I discuss them. But the thing about this guy is he's got one of the most quirky and sort of messy sort of profile lineups in the game, because on the one hand he's a close combat specialist, but on the other hand he can be equipped with some pretty powerful weapons. You can take Prothion, but while you're using Prothion, you can't actually make use of your Vorpal close combat weapon in close combat, so that's sort of weird. You can throw your Vorpal close combat at range, but you know, why would you do that when you've got a Plasma Carbine and a Spitfire? You're more likely to win the face-to-face roll that way. So he is a bit weird. Super Jump is probably one of the most defining things about him. And I think it's really important if you guys look at the tactical tips in Human Sphere 3, it does actually mention that Prothion does give you stealth. So what you can be doing is super jumping around the table, avoiding your opponents, maybe cautious moving, and then what you want to do is jump into combat with people and strip wounds off them with Prothion, and make sure you level yourself up, because as soon as you are above 1 wound, then you become immune to shock, and shock's the easiest way to get around his no wound incapacitation. I find that the best use of this guy is to just hide him and not use him if you can't see an opening for him. Don't just throw him away. But if you can see an application for him, you want to fly him over the other side of the battlefield, eat up a guy as soon as you can. Bear in mind that Prothion level 4 gives you a burst 2 attack, and if you strip 2 wounds off them in one order, which is quite likely, then you're up to 3 wounds, and you've got NWI, so you've got effectively 4 wounds kicking around, and it becomes your opponent really ineffective for your opponent to remove him, because when they're going after him, he's got kinematica and hyperdynamics, so he's quite sticky in that case. It's quite hard for them to get rid of him. So that's the value of him, but you may be up against opponents that don't give you the opportunity to do that. So once again, the profile that I like most for this guy is the Spitfire version. And the reason why I like that is that a lot of the time your opponent's going to be so well deployed, and you're trying to beat the good players. You're not, I mean, let's not talk about the bad players, because you'll beat the bad players no matter what profiles you take. It's not going to matter then. But to beat people who are as good or better than you, you want to be sort of harnessing the value of a unit. And I feel that the Spitfire is the right way to go, because there's a wider range of situations where you'll be getting a little bit of value out of this guy by super jumping up high enough to shoot models that were on tops of roofs and things like that, and actually traversing the terrain to get to that sweet spot where you can win those face-to-face rolls. It's not going to be this glory player going over there and eating all their models in close combat, because against better players you're going to find that hard to do, so you're going to be struggling to get value out of them if you don't do that. So I think the Spitfire is really what he wants. Sometimes I take the Breaker Combi Rifle because I don't have enough SWC points, so that might be a reason for taking that, but that weapon is just not really as good as the Spitfire in most cases, in my view. There is the Assault Hacking Program. Now, if you need to have a specialist, then fine. He is vulnerable to killer hacking, which I hate, and I think that's a real liability. And we're going to talk about the Xeodron batroid shortly, where he's in a harass team with 2 tags. And some people think that when you're super jumping around the battlefield and you've got that much points locked up in a 3-model unit, well, one of them is going to need to be a specialist, so this guy's going to need to be the specialist. I just don't like it. I mean, your opponent, if they take him out with a hacking attack, Trinity or Red Rum or whatever, is just going to kill him outright. So he's just going to be biting the dust there, and then they can go on to start possessing your batroids and so forth. So I just don't like it. Other people will give you opinions about that, and if you search online for views on that, you'll find people who support that harass, and they'll give you their reasons, and do listen to what they say about that. I don't like it. I don't recommend it. There are a couple of profiles where he can be a lieutenant, but for reasons I discussed earlier, just wouldn't recommend it either. I mean, spending lieutenant's order in your Rambo run is just not worth it, because being a lost lieutenant sucks, and this faction doesn't have enough to get around lost lieutenant. Yes, you may take like a duo of Suryats and some Rodoks and another Rodok, but even then, I mean, it's just not really as good a list. So make the Nexus your lieutenant, or the Noctifer. Samaritan, really cool. I think there's probably more we could talk about. I mean, the Vorpal close combat weapon. If you are in close combat with a tag, you've got CC24. If the tag does not have a shock close combat weapon and you can afford to lose, then it's probably better to use that rather than the Prothion. If you're up against a Jotun who's armor 10, then you're really going to need to be getting the crits through, otherwise he's going to tank every armor save. So that is when I'd actually attack with his Vorpal close combat weapon. You might be able to move around the back of like a Jotun and not get shot at him and throw the Vorpal close combat weapon instead of shooting a Spitfire. Well, you're hitting on a 15 at short range and he has to beat a 12 or he dies. So the chances of removing from the table are good enough that it's probably worth throwing it in that case, but for most other cases it's not really worth using that weapon, despite how cool it actually is. Moving on now to the Mark Rep Tracker, and this is another model that comes with the starter set. So he's this awesome looking guy, yet again another sort of corrupted Toha sort of type of alien, and the Marut is the only model in this faction that has a multispectral visor. The thing about multispectral visor though is that it's at its strongest when you are laying down your own smoke templates and you're firing through smoke against things that don't have MSV2. And because he cannot achieve that in Onyx, he's not as good as he is in Vanilla Combined. Now, is that enough of a detriment to not take him? I think so, but I'm not going to impose that view on you because I think there are a lot of you out there who will be up against situations where they've got a post-human sniper and TO camera across the board and you've got nothing that can really shoot at it reliably. So if you feel you can't solve problems like that on your own and you need the Mark Rep, or you find the Mark Rep's more efficient than other choices, then you probably should take him. He's Bliss Skill 12, got the automatic kit, 6 Sense is kind of fun, he's not that expensive, so solid unit all around. I mean, I'm not gonna say he's bad, but what I do want to say is that, again, if you're in one of those situations where your opponents put that hack tower with suppression fire in the middle of the field, or a post-human sniper, or what have you, or they've got a cutter or something like that, if you just really feel like you're unable to deal with that, then maybe the Mark Ripper is your kind of trooper. But for me, I'm thinking, well, maybe I've got a Unidron with a plasma sniper in a 5-man link team with assisted fire on him. So I'm shooting and hitting on 17s minus TO camo, so I'm hitting on 11s, and they're shooting back at maybe 12, 13, or 15, depending on who they are, Swiss Guard missile launcher, something like that, with 1 dice. I've got 3 dice, and even if I do get hit, I have to take 3 wounds outright, otherwise Dogged's going to kick in with remote presence and I'm going to have another go at winning the face-to-face roll. But as soon as I get the face-to-face rolls 1 there, well, I've got a plasma sniper and that ignores the cover armor save and they're going to take 2 saves. So I feel like even against those models I'm going to be able to win the face-to-face roll and crush them. So that's why I don't feel that the multispectral visor is that useful. In Vanilla Combined, though, it's just another story because you've got smoke grenades there, and that's when the MSV2 can be used to pick off individual units one by one and solve that problem very efficiently. And you don't have access to the brute force of your link teams like you do in Onyx, which is why the Mark Rep becomes a bit more relevant. Alright, here we go. So it's the Rodoks time. As you guys know, they come with a starter set, so a lot of you guys have them because you bought the Onyx starter set. You can also buy them individually if, like me, you don't have that starter set and you want to just add them to your collection. And like I said before, the missile launcher guys just come out as this video has been released. So what's good and what's bad about the Rodoks? A lot of people love these guys, by the way. A lot of people really think that they are amazing. Why might they think that? Well, first reason is that if you're using them in a defensive link team to shoot at long range, they start at Blister Skill 12 and they've got mimetism, so swinging the face-to-face roll in your favor is quite easy. You can take an HMG, so shooting at long range against cover, you've got you're hitting on 15s, and if they're shooting you back with something imposing and significant, even if it's something powerful like a Yanhuo missile launcher with neurocynetics, I mean, the other guys are shooting you back 14, plus minus for cover, minus 3 for mimetism. That's 2 dice on 11s versus your 5 dice on 12, or 15s I should say. So there's a lot of brute force with the Rodoks, and that mimetism really makes it worth it for a lot of people, and the armor too, kind of helpful in close combat. Then there's the fact that you might use the Rodoks as an aggressive link team, in which case you're making use of super jumps. So your opponent might be on rooftops of buildings and you're jumping up and you're firing their boarding shotguns in their face. They've got mines to lay around the middle of the table, so you've got an assault hacking device in there, so they can be pretty blasty and they can be pretty confrontational. Obviously the Morats, so if your lieutenant does die, you're still contributing some regular orders to the pool, so that's all cool. My main beef with the Rodoks is that you can't take a core fire team of Rodoks and have the core fire team active on them at the same time you have it on the Unidrons. And the Unidron link team, for its points, is hands down better than the Rodok link team. In fact, I'd be inclined to say that even if the Unidrons were a little bit more expensive and the Rodoks were a little bit cheaper, I would still go for the Unidrons. And we'll talk about that a little bit more soon, but it's going to have to do with the fact that the Unidrons can get assisted fire, allowing them to ignore the cover bonus and have shock weapons purely for the price of just including a hacker in your army, which you're probably going to take anyway. And they've got access to the missile launcher and the plasma rifle, which is nice. But more importantly, they have the combination of dogged and remote presence, which allows them to go dogged while defending or attacking, and that's going to be really critical for reasons we'll talk about soon. But rather than just going dogged after taking 1 wound, if they take exactly 2 wounds from a particular order, then they still stay dogged, and shock doesn't work against them because they are remotes. Now, the Rodoks cannot do that, and the benefits you get from having mimetism and extra ballistic skill and super jump just don't outshine those amazing benefits that the Unidrons get, and the Unidrons are cheaper. So that's why I don't think that the Rodoks are as good, and in Onyx, if you want to do your best with Onyx, I think you should be taking the Unidrons instead. Moving on, the Suryats. I like these guys even less than the Rodoks in this particular army list. If you're playing Morats, the Morat faction, and there is a video on my YouTube channel talking about Morats, there is a time and place for the Suryats. You can make a Harris team with Cornac and Friend, and having the HMG is really cool. In Onyx, I don't like them as much, because as an ARO piece, you've got that locked down with your Unidron team. For attacking, I think you should probably be using the Noctifer Spitfire, the Samaritan, maybe the Fractal, or the one of the tags, or the Xeodron, or even the Sphinx. Like if you're going to be all about attacking, just this one guy with BS13 and the HMG or something like that is just not as powerful. I often like to compare this dude to the Nomad Mobile Brigada, because they both have 4-4, they both have BS13, they both have Armor 4, they both have access to HMGs and multi-rifles and things. The difference with the Nomad Brigada, and the reason why I take the Brigada in vanilla Nomads, is that there isn't anything else in the army that really fulfills that solid sort of point man Rambo role, which is sad, because, you know, if that's the best they can do, they're not great at Ramboing, and that is the case. Nomads don't Rambo you as hard as some other factions do. They've got other things to make up for that. They've got wonderful, models with crazy koalas and specialists and infiltrators and close combat and all sorts of fun jazz. But the Suryat is outshined, and his thunder is stolen by a lot of other better models in Onyx. It does say Fireteam Duo there, but I hate Fireteam Duo. My opinion of Fireteam Duo is that you are taking a model which is usually overcosted anyway, and you're doubling its cost. You get no bonuses to that model by taking the guy along with you. Really all you're doing is you're moving your duo around the table and putting double the amount of points in a position where your opponent can just attack them. And if you're staying in a deployment zone, well, you're not making use of the benefit of Duo. So there isn't much benefit to Duo, to be honest. They're still yet to bring out a model which I feel uses that ability well. So we'll see when that actually comes. But I'm going to skip these guys because I don't really like them. I don't really think that they are worth it in Onyx. It'd be cool. It would be cool if one of them could join another link. Like if you could have one Suryat in the Rodok team or in the Unidron team. That would be cool, because you can use him as the point man, and he can soak up a wound before it goes down. So having him as an arrow piece or as an attacking piece with 2 wounds and extra armor would make that better. In the same way that Crane becomes amazing in a link of like cheaper Celestial Guards, if you guys know what I mean. So that's where I would take the Suryat. Moving on now to the Overdrons. So we looked at the Suryats. By the way, amazing models. I really love the Suryat box set. The models look cool. It's a shame that they aren't as usable. The Overdrons, though, here he is here. He comes with a plasma sniper and the little tin bots. I have converted mine to have a heavy rocket launcher, and that's the profile I recommend. But I have played games with the HRMC as well, and we'll talk about these guys for a bit. When this box first came out and I first heard about the Overdrons, I thought, unplayable trash. I thought, If you are in the active turn and you're shooting with them, well, there are other things that can kill them in a face-to-face role, And if you're reacting, well, he's not going to be an ARO piece, because whatever they use to shoot him at, it's just going to shoot him, and he's just going to be this big paperweight, right, for too many points. Having thought about it a bit more, I've come around to the fact that these guys are actually pretty good, and I do run them, and I do actually find myself quite successful with them. And there's a few reasons why. Reason number one, you can take the heavy rocket launcher profile if you want to, and that tag is actually cheap as chips. If you compare him to the other two profiles, he's way cheaper than them. 57 points is like heavy infantry expensive, like you're talking about in the realms of, you know, Aquila guards and Swiss guards, sort of in that range. So there's that. Next up, he's got an albedo, which is actually an extremely handy piece of tech. You're up against nomads, and they've got an intruder sitting there. Well, you can walk your Overdron around the battlefield shooting things, and he can't ARO with his intruder. Or you can directly attack the intruder, and the intruder's at -6. Or you can leave him out there to ARO your opponent, and the intruder can't just shoot at you. Same goes for things like Sien Warriors in a Zanying Harris, or the Aquila Guard and Suppression Fire, or, you know, whatever it might be. Or maybe like a Hakaslam, you know, with a smoke grenade and some Jambazans coming out to shoot you. They just can't do that in the first game round. So you have until at least the second game round to do things, if your opponent's got nothing else that can just shoot him to death. The second thing I love about this guy is that with just armor 6 and remote presence, even if you left him out to ARO and your opponent just started hosing him with bullets, how many orders is it going to take them to take 3 wounds off him and then remove him from the board through 2 levels of unconscious? If it takes them 7 orders and it's quite a tight game, I'm willing to let my batroid go. I'm willing to let you just kill this guy, because you've spent your entire doing that, and I've lost 1 order and 57 points. And there's going to be enough stuff left in my army. There's going to be Malignos and Noctifers and things I can go and clean up with and actually get things done in my turn. The thing is, if they commit to that and they get a little bit unlucky and they spend all of those orders and they don't remove them from the table, they just make them unconscious level 2, well, you've got a slave drone with a Dr. Worm just to repair him back to full, like, 1 wound, and then he can start attacking you. With the heavy rocket launcher, it just stops your opponent from sort of clustering up, and you might get situations where you clip him. And then, I think lastly, with them having brought out the Xeodron is willpower 13, so he can be a specialist, which can actually be handy. It doesn't come up much, but it's still really good. Oh, and by the way, did I mention he's got a deflector? So with BTS 6 plus 3, well, there you go. It's going to be a lot more difficult to possess him. He's a bit slow, but yeah, I still really like the Overdron. Compare that though to the Sphinx. So we've talked about the Overdron. The Sphinx is quite a different story, because he is way more expensive than the Overdron, and for good reason. He's probably the best Rambo tag in the game that I can think of. I can't really think of any tag that is as murderous as this guy and is as well equipped for going off and killing them. He's pretty extreme. 106 points, more than a third of your army. And let's look at why. 6.6 speed, not just 6.4, extremely fast. You'd have to be a motorbike to go faster than this guy. I find that really valuable, because you want to absolutely maximize the order expenditure on this guy. As soon as your turn's over and your opponent has a chance of removing him, that's when you're in a lot of trouble and they can win. But if he's managed to cross the field in like 2 orders, because he's 6.6 speed, and then he's just spending 6 to 8 orders shooting them, there might not be too much of them left. Especially considering the fact that he's got climbing plus, so he can get into position a lot more effectively, and just get over buildings and things and shoot at weird angles. BS-14 and the Spitfire, no problem. He doesn't need an HMG. He's got TO camo, so he's in a marker state, going to the point where he's within the right range band, and then he's just absolutely blasting them. The 2 heavy flamers you're not going to use as much, because the opponent's just going to be dodging. But one fun thing is just to move in very close. If your opponent does declare a face-to-face roll of attacking you back with chain rifles and so forth, you can lay both flamethrowers down, and it's much less likely they'll survive the armor save, because they've got to take 2 saves. And if it allows you to clip not just the pleb with the chain rifle, but also the TO camo marker behind it, and actually flush that out of cover, the flamethrowers were awesome. If he does get attacked in close combat, well, you know, they better make sure they don't get unlucky because you've got an explosive close combat weapon, which is pretty amazing. Bear in mind that he can surprise attack with his marker state when he goes into close combat, if he ever does that. And he even has a specialist Xeodron to pop out of him. Do I recommend this guy? All I would say is that just make sure that you have a plan and you know what you're doing, and it's not just a matter of just pointing them at the enemy and attacking, because against good opponents, you'll run out of steam and the rest of your list won't have enough to win. But if you know the kind of people you play in tournaments, you know the regulars, you know the kind of tables you play on, if you've practiced them a bit, definitely, I think that a Sphinx Onyx list is can be quite a strong list, and we'll have a go at writing a list a little bit later in the video. Next up, we've got the Xeodron batroids, and this is the third type of tag you can take in Onyx, and I'm going to come out right away and say that I don't like the Xeodrons. I know a lot of you guys do, and I agree the models are really cool, and you get 2 of them in the box set because of the Harris Link team, but I don't really rate them. There is a special link team we talked about where you can take 2 Xeodron batroids and a Samaritan, and if we look at that, maybe you take the assault hacking device, and maybe you take a Red Fury and a multi-rifle. So you've spent 160 points, you've got 3 orders out of that, and this link team is very vulnerable to hacking and to close combat, and sometimes even to just straight shooting. And it takes up a huge amount of points. In terms of aggressive potential, these guys, their damage output isn't necessarily any more than you know, what you can achieve with Unidrons. Let's say you're marching across the battlefield with a 5-man Unidron team led by a Spitfire, and you've put enhanced fire on that guy, assisted fire on him. Well, his shooting potential is better than this link team, and that's for like 60 to 80 points cheaper. About 80 points cheaper, actually. So that is a big difference. Yes, the Samaritan can be a specialist, but there's so many other ways to press buttons in this game. And, you know, for him to actually find a place to get into close combat, he's having to lug the tags with him, so it's not ideal. In ARO, I mean, yes, they've got two bursts, but that's it. They're only Blister Skill 13, the Samaritan's Blister Skill 12. They all have super jump, so that can sound quite scary, but remember the Xeodrons aren't 6-4 speed, they're 4-4 speed, so they have to slow down at the same pace as the Samaritan. Super jumping is cool, but I prefer the super jump on guys like the Seraph, who's got a bit more speed, or the Krakot Renegades once they roll up the 6-4 with super jump. Things like that. Diomedes, who can come on the side of the table. Guys who are a little bit more agile, a bit more convenient to sort of position. With these guys, you might super jump and run into like an assault hacking device or something like that, or a ninja might come out of hidden deployment and just start attacking you because he can attack the Xeodron before he attacks the Umbra Samaritan. These guys absolutely hate EM grenades, so they are vulnerable against that as well. Just speculative fire in general might sort of mess them up a little bit if they go for their Samaritan in the middle. I feel like there are going to be some people watching this video who, like, no matter how much I talk, they're still going to be loving these guys and taking them because they perform well in their games. And there are probably some people watching the video who I've already sold and I didn't even need to convince them. So there's probably few people on the fence about this, but sadly, wouldn't recommend them. What about just taking one of them? Well, the thing there is, let's say we take the Red Fury guy. Well, we can always already have a super jumping Spitfire with the Samaritan, who's cheaper, and he's got a little bit more ability when it comes to close combat, and a bit more stuff he can do, and he can actually gain wounds with a Prothyon. If we take the multi-rifle, well, he's just a 4-4 speed guy who starts in deployment zone, and actually it's quite hard to get out there. I forgot to mention to you guys that they've got Blitzens, so in that Harris LinkedIn we talked about, they can let go of both Blitzen rounds at once when they're arrowing, so that can be quite cool, but they only have one shot at that before they're unloaded. They're going to need the help of the Xeodrons to reload, and I'd much rather just be arrowing with like a plasma sniper and a 5-man link that has assisted fire on it, thank you very much, or Rodok Mimetism with missile launcher even if you really want to go down that path. I'm going to stop talking about these guys now. Let's move on to the Evo hacking devices, the E-drone. This is the only Evo in the game that has a combi rifle, but I don't like them because if you're just going to be hacking, well, you may as well have a Nexus for a lot cheaper. And if you're just going to be fighting, well, there's a lot of things that fight better than just this combi rifle guy. So a lot of people have discovered since HSN3 that the Evo is not really that useful. You get a free control jump from your hacking, but if you're really dedicated to running the Fractal and you're really dedicated to dropping it down behind your opponent's army, you can just use your Nexus to put it up using one order or the Lieutenant's order. So that's cool. He's got upgrades like Exile and Goodnight, but they're very situational and don't see a lot of value in enough games for me to recommend this guy to you. I would recommend the Nexus instead. I'm sorry about that, but this guy, I don't think he cuts it. Xeodron batroid will be in every Onyx list that I write. I can't see myself ever not taking these guys, and the reason is that there are so many expensive things in this faction that you are just desperate for cheap troops, and the fact that you can only take 2 of them hurts. If I could take 4 of them, I would. What you want to do if you're serious about playing Onyx is to buy 2 of the blister packs which have 1 of these guys each, so you get the 2 Imetrons and 2 batroids, and that's because you can only take 2 of each in the army, and you probably are going to be taking 2 Imetrons and 2 Xeodron batroids in just about every list. So go for it. These guys are repeaters. They have baggage. They're only 9 points. They can reload things like Blitzens and stuff that you run out of ammo for. Auto tool's not so relevant because you don't have a mnemonic, but BTS 6 is also kind of handy if they try to hit you with a nanopulse or something like that, or you try to get flash pulsed or something like that. The double flamethrowers can make them kind of handy for attacking something. Movement 6-2 also pretty useful, especially if you're doing a coordinated order where you're moving a specialist onto an objective and the Xeodron batroids are coming into the zone to contest. Well, the first shot skill, you've got the full 6 inches. You don't have to worry about the 2-inch secondary skill because you're doing something else with the other model elsewhere in the coordinated order. These guys are just so useful and efficient. Even though you're probably not going to be spending any orders on them a lot of the time, you really need them in your list, because if you don't, you're going to have too few orders overall. The M-Drone is your basic standard sensor bot. At 17 points, I think he comes in like 1 point more expensive than a lot of other sensor bots in other factions. If you are struggling with Marcus State, you're up against Ariadna quite a lot, you really find that the sat locks and so forth and the deactivator come in handy, then you should probably run this guy. I don't run him a lot, but I think that's more to do with my meta than the value of this model. I still think he's solid. He's a fast specialist. A lot of the time he's just going to act as a cheerleader. But again, if you lose your Q-drone, you can put enhanced assist fire on him as well and actually shoot with his combi rifle. There's nothing wrong with the M-drone. The Q-drone, though, is even more interesting, and this is your regular TR bot, but he's a bit more special than that, because he's got mimetism, which is the only TR bot in the game that has it, and you can equip him with a plasma rifle instead of an HMG. So when I first came across this model, I thought, damn, he's busted, because he's a TR bot, which is already good, and he's got mimetism, which makes it even harder for your opponent to crack him when he's defending. Then after that I thought, actually no, he's trash, because just like all other TR bots, if your opponent is attacking you, they're going to be attacking you with something like, you know, smoke and an HMG with MSV2 and just wiping him off the table. And unless you crit, and there's only like a 15 to 20% chance of that, then he's just going to be dead weight. So that's when I thought they were terrible. But then I've come back to thinking they're really good again, and the reason why I rate these guys highly now is that I've finally realized and understood that you don't actually use them for total reaction. That's not their main job. The Q-drone is actually there as a Rambo in your first or second turn when you don't want to bust in there with your Samaritan or your Sphinx or whatever yet. You actually want to hold on to that because your opponent's defended so well that you can't afford to blow your Rambo on that turn. So you use your Q-drone as the Rambo, and you move out, picking off what targets you can, and then come back to your deployment zone unless there's a good opportunity for suicide. So even with the HMG, you're blasting in the long range, you've got assisted fire on, they're not hitting you as easily with the HMG, so he's just this reliable target for killing the War Corps or their link team member on patrol, on ARO patrol. In Onyx, I've started taking the plasma rifle more than the HMG. I think the HMG is a better option maybe for vanilla combined, but for Onyx, I take the plasma rifle because the long range bands are already handled by the Unidrons. I've got the missile launchers and the plasma sniper, and also the Noctifer in hidden deployment with the missile launcher. And because those long fire lanes are being covered by those models, I want the plasma rifle. Also, the plasma rifle is harder to sneak up on because, as opposed to like a croc band coming to within 8 inches and TO camo and surprise shot, the HMG just hits on zeros, can't attack back. The plasma rifle does have a chance of rolling that low dice roll crit. So there is that. The plasma rifle, not only does it ignore cover for the face-to-face roll with assisted fire, it ignores cover for the armor save because of the template weapon, which you can use. If they're out in the open, you just use the hit mode damage 14, even better. Forces them to take a normal armor save and a BTS save, and it puts the templates out behind them like a shotgun. So it's just sickeningly powerful. If you guys have been watching my bat reps recently, you might have seen a couple of devastating moves from this Xeodron. And I'm actually starting to take the Xeodron almost always in my Onyx lists, and for the reason I said, I prefer the plasma rifle. The HMG is also good. But lastly, does total reaction ever come up? Of course it does. I just think that total reactions are more valuable later in the game once they've run out of good models to easily remove it with, and they are stuck with second-rate active turn models to try and actually clear your guy out for them to take the objectives at the end of the game. Where are we at? So Overdron. One thing about Neoterra Capitoline Army, the NCA from Panoceana, that I find I am jealous of is that they can take 3 flash drones, whereas Onyx only get 1. But you should still take them anyway because you need that 8-point cheerleader in there to make it to enough orders, because you're going to be just gorging yourself and splashing out in these expensive models, Samaritans and Noctifers and maybe tags and so forth. You're going to be needing some cheap cheerleaders in there, and this guy does provide that. Plus he can arrow with his flash pulse. He's 6/6 speed. Speaking of flash pulses, I forgot to mention the Samaritan has one too. I forgot to say that. Willpower 14 actually is kind of handy if you're arrowing instead of dodging with hyperdynamics. Sometimes it's better to blast them with the flash pulse. But yeah, back to the Overdron. 100% recommend this guy. Slave drone, we've talked about that. He links up to the Medtech Dr. Worm. T-drone. So this is the variation of the drone that has the smart missile launcher, and as with any other faction, I'd love to run this guy. I've tried it once or twice. I don't recommend it because it is so hard to get a spotlight onto a model to target it, or to actually beat someone in a face-to-face roll in the active turn with a forward observation. You're just risking so much doing that. And even if you do get it, the rules say that you're restricted to 5 shots with a smart missile launcher, and if they've got a hacker on the table, they can just U-turn hacking program for free, reducing the effectiveness of the shot. It's burst 1, your opponent can dodge. There are better things you can spend your special weapons cost points on. It's a too passive way to play Infinity. If I were you, I'd look for other opportunities to crush them rather than just sitting back and hoping that you get a model in targeted state and there happens to be a bunch of guys just bunched up. Don't take this guy. Right, we've left the best stuff for last. Unidron batroids. This is the reason why I play Onyx, and why in the long run you might consider Onyx to be on par with or better than Vanilla combined. I personally still think that Vanilla combined is a little bit ahead of the Sectorials, so I think the combined army is one of the exceptions where the Vanilla version of the faction is better than the Sectorials. Why are the Unidrons so good though? So imagine that you're playing against a Onyx player and you've got something hefty like a Swiss Guard with HMG, which kills anything in the active turn, and you're up against this link team of Unidrons, and your opponent's already put assisted fire on their plasma sniper or missile launcher. So you're coming around the corner with your beautiful Swiss Guard, one of the best attacking Rambos at mid-range in the game. You're shooting at, say, 30 inches away, and your bliss skill 15, so +3 for range, -3 for cover, and you've got 4 dice hitting on 15s. And that drone is shooting back at bliss skill 11, +3 for the link, +3 for range, -0 for cover because he's got assisted fire. So that's 17, -6 for your TO camo to 11. He ignores your surprise shot because of 6th sense. So your 4 dice on 15s against his 2 dice on 11s is pretty good for you. If the Unidron rolls a crit, you're gone, because that's a missile launcher or a plasma sniper rifle, so chances are you are going to take some punishment there. If you just fail the face-to-face roll because you roll like a 1, a 4, a 16, and a 20, and the Unidron rolls a couple of hits, then you're gone. So that was a huge risk. But if you hit and you inflict only 1 wound or 2 wounds, and not 3 wounds or 4 wounds, as is likely, then you will have to attack him again and face the same penalties to remove him. Otherwise you have to wait till the end of the turn, and if you wait till the end of the turn, yes, Dogged, forces him to expire, but nothing else can move out because that Unidron is still holding the entire battlefield. If, on the other hand, you're sitting there with your awesome, Swiss Guard missile launcher, and you've come out of aero to shoot at the Unidron who has stepped out with his plasma sniper, and the missile goes off victoriously and hits him. Well, what if you don't inflict 3 wounds? If it's only 2 wounds, then the Unidron is still standing there, and he can spend another order, and he basically has nothing to lose at this point. If the Unidron takes more wounds, well, it was going to die anyway. But if he does spend another order and then fires his plasma sniper rifle or missile launcher at you and beats you in the face-to-face roll, which the chances aren't too bad, it's sort of like 11s against 15s, and they're on 2 dice, you're on 1 with the Swiss Guard. Well, you're kind of crushed there, and the Swiss Guard is worth almost as much as the entire Unidron Link team. Now, that's a Swiss Guard. There are a lot of other things in the game which just don't have a chance. Like, I mean, you're talking about tags and so forth. Would you really want to fire at them with your tag, even if you're like a Jotun? You're hitting on 15s, sure, but you don't ignore Dogged. And they're hitting you on 17s in a lot of cases on 2 dice. So, would you want to risk taking a hit to the face with a missile from your guy? Not really. So that makes them very cheap. You may have seen a forum post from me at one point where I talked about running like a whole list of like 8 of these guys and having 4 with a Nexus in one group and 4 with a Nexus in the other group, and pad it out with Imetrons and Xeodrons and Overdrons, and have one like 10-man group running across the battlefield with assisted fire, shooting the K1 combi rifles and plasma carbines at close range with assisted fire, ruining as much as you can, then moving out and doing the same thing with another 10 orders from the other group. You can make a list like that, which is insane. So, Unidron batroid's just amazing. I love having the Nexus in the second group to use the Lieutenant order to put a assisted fire on them, but they are just amazing value. And they got BTS 6, so good against hacking and good against weapons that do damage to BTS. Lastly, there's the Malignos. This is the only infiltrating specialist, but luckily he's a good one. Unlike the Shrouded, he's in hidden deployment. Unlike something like the... a lot of Sectorials don't have a really good infiltrating camo specialist. Like NCA have only got the Locust, which nowhere near as good as these guys. So these guys, I don't like them as much as I like the Crocman. But unlike the Crocman, they're willpower 14, so they're a bit more reliable at pressing buttons. They're just a little bit more on the expensive side, but they've got that auto med kit, and I would definitely recommend taking the Fort Observer or the Assault Hacker. The Assault Hacker is vulnerable to killer hacking and sometimes not wonderful, costs a bit more, but he can be good if your opponents are playing a lot of heavy infantry and tags, especially if you're playing the smaller lists like a limited insertion. Can be very good there when you know you're going to be up against something like that, or the missions like Deadly Dance where you know it's likely your opponent will take a tag for the extra bonus point. You can take a monofilament mines profile. Don't do that. You don't need the monofilament mines. As soon as you put down the mine, it reveals your model. Your opponent can ask which profile you've taken. You have to respond that it is a monofilament profile, so your opponent knows you put down one of those mines. They're not going to walk into that with their tag, so don't take that profile. The boarding shotgun's nice, but again, just not a specialist. Multi-sniper, don't take the multi-sniper. God, just don't do that. The Noctifer is way cheaper, and the Noctifer benefits from having Dogged, and he can take a missile launcher instead of a sniper rifle, which is going to be more useful. So don't take that profile. I know he's got infiltration. Don't do it, guys. That's not the best profile in the context of this subfaction. Take the Fort Observer or the Assault hacking device, probably the Fort Observer, but you should have one of these guys in most lists for most missions. You can take a Lieutenant, but again, you're going to be wanting to do so much with this guy that he's going to put you into Lost Lieutenant when he dies, and he costs 2 SWCs. I don't know why, but if there was anything else sort of preventing me from taking this guy, it'd be the SWCs there. So that's it. We've gone through all the profiles. Hope you guys enjoyed that analysis. Hopefully you have some stuff to say. Let's very quickly just run through some list building, and I won't take too long in this, but let's imagine that I am a new player and I have just bought this force here, the starter set. I think that the box actually comes with a list written in it, but we're going to make our own one anyway. So because nothing else in that list can really effectively be the lieutenant as well as the legate, I'm going to choose a Spitfire legate lieutenant. I guess we could make the Rodok the lieutenant, but he's just going to be in harm's way as much as this guy, and at least this guy's got NWI. The Fractal, I'm going to choose the Spitfire Fractal, and we'll downgrade that Spitfire to something else later if we run out of SWCs. The Mark Rep is in there. We're going to give him an HMG. That's the most straightforwardly good profile. I don't think the hacker's really worth it. It doesn't really combine well with MSV2, and you want a long-ranged active turn gun if you're using an MSV2. Rodoks, so we've got an HMG in there. We're going to take a couple of specialists, and we're going to take a boarding shotgun because he's really cheap. Next up, we have a Xeodron. I know that the packaging says Xeodron. I think it's actually got, the model itself has actually got the piece on it, which I think is a heavy rocket launcher piece, although I can't really tell too easily. Regardless, we're going to take the Xeodron, and we're actually going to take the HMG version. It's a bit more straightforward and easy to use, especially if you're new. The other drone, I think, has to be a hacker, because we're going to need a hacker in the list overall, so it may as well be the E-drone, even though I don't like the E-drone. I guess we could make the Fractal a hacker, but I'd rather bite the bullet on this guy rather than one of the Rodoks or the Fractal, because I prefer to have the hacker at the back of the army. We could make the Umbra the hacker by having a hacking device plus, but then he can't really be the lieutenant. So we've got that in there, and Unidron batroids. We're going to take some specialists, so I've got 3 of them in there, and that I think completes the list. So we haven't actually hit the right number of army points, and we've gone over SWCs. I think what we'll have to do here is actually downgrade the Fractal. So instead of taking the Spitfire version, we're going to try and take the combi rifle version. Alright, so we're still under points. We're going to go to the Rodok boarding shotgun, and we're going to take something else. What can I get for 10 points to upgrade him? Combi rifle and 2 light shotguns works pretty well. Yeah, I think having a combi rifle in there works pretty well. And now we have almost 300 points. So this starts becoming the realm of playable. There's no M-drone or anything. Sorry, Dr. Worm, so no point taking a slave drone. Now that we've built our list, we don't want the Unidrons in Group 2, we want to move them to Group 1. We want to put the Xeodron and the E-drone in Group 2, and the reason for this is that in Group 2, if we're going to spend 2 orders, we can use to reposition with a Xeodron or make 1 or 2 shots with it. The E-drone can spend the order putting assisted fire on the Xeodron, and that's the only thing it can put the order on in the first place. So that's what the basic starter set army might look like. I don't like this army. I don't think that's it's a particularly competitive army, because there's a lot of stuff in there which isn't very efficient, but you can definitely play and win. And I've lost at least 1 game, if not 2 games. I've lost at least 2 games against lists like this, just because it sometimes surprises you, and sometimes your dice aren't good, or maybe I make a mistake. But there's enough stuff in here to press buttons on objectives. You've got the E-drone and the 3 Unidrons and the 2 paramedics, so you've got like 6 specialists there. You can do a lot of fast attack damage with the Fractal, and you've got a lot of brute force with the Mark Rep and the Rodok. You've got MSV2 in there, so that's actually looking really cool. Let's delete that. So the next list I want to look at, which I want to sort of showcase, is the list which some people like to go for if they think highly of the Samaritan and Xeodron. So let's take the assault hacking device. We'll take the Xeodron, so Red Fury and a multi-rifle, quite efficient there. We'll go to the Unidron batroids, and we'll grab a plasma sniper rifle, a specialist. We'll get a couple of regular ones to keep the points down. Then we'll chuck the lieutenant hacker in there as well. We're already on 8 points, 8 orders rather. We're going to chuck the Xeodrons in there because they're very cheap. Just going to move my my face out of the way. 269 now, so we can afford to put the Imetrons in Group 2. We can take a Xeodron at probably long range. Isn't a bad idea for this one because we've got a lot of short range stuff in there with the Xeodrons. And we've just about hit 300 points now, so that's a variation you can take. I think with a bit more thought going into this, we could probably build a better list, but you can sort of see a little bit why I don't like it. You've got half your army out in this big chunk out in the field, which is quite vulnerable. The Unidrons probably aren't doing enough work, and as soon as that plasma sniper rifle is overcome, you're in a bit of trouble. We could take the Xeodron out and then put another Unidron in there, but if they've got something that can kill one Unidron, chance that they've got something that can overcome it in the long run. I just don't think there's enough versatility in this list, but again, I've only spent about 10 seconds creating it, so maybe there's more value in that one. Let me just go straight to the list that I feel I am most comfortable with personally at the moment that I would run, and you may have seen this in my bat reps, so let's just reduce the size of this. Okay, so I quite like the Samaritan Spitfire, as you guys know, to be a versatile attack piece that punishes your opponent and doesn't necessarily have to be used. You can pull them back. We want the Xeodron with Plasma Rifle, just in case there's no opportunity for the Samaritan, so it's going to be one of those guys opening up the show at the start. Of course, we're going to go Unidrons. I like the Plasma Sniper Rifle and the Missile Launcher. I think they're both really powerful. In fact, I might even just go for the Plasma Sniper Rifle, but just because it has better range bands than the Missile Launcher, even though the Missile Launcher is more punishing. In addition to that, we're going to grab one Specialist plus 2 normal guys. With the Nexus, I will complete that link team with just the regular guy who's not the Lieutenant, but I'm also going to take the Lieutenant Specialist Hacker, because he's going to go into Group 2. Obviously, we must take 2 Icodrons. We are going to take the Ardrone because we need cheap stuff here. Swap the Lieutenant to Group 2, the Ardrone goes to Group 1, so that's looking really good. Then the Imetrons can fill up the points in Group 2. I will take a Noctifer because the Noctifer, as we talked about, supreme value from the Noctifer, so that gives us the missile launcher at that long range. I wouldn't mind a Spitfire here either. It's just that since we're dropping the missile launcher out of the link team, we're adding it in with the Noctifer. One funny trick you can do is you can set up the plasma sniper and you can just put him in a position where your opponent might attack him with something strong, and then hide the Noctifer right next to him, so when your opponent comes around that corner to shoot at your plasma sniper, you arrow with the plasma sniper and arrow surprisingly with the Noctifer at the same time, which can really catch them off guard. Sometimes a move like that could win you the game. On top of this, we do want Dr. Worm for the classifieds and for potentially repairing the Noctifer or the Samaritan or whatever might be happening, or the Xeodron probably most likely, since everything else has Dogged or NWI. So he's going to go in there for sure, and we do need a Malignos, so the Forward Observing Malignos is going to be the one I'm going to take. We could take the Assault Hacker, but there's so much else in this list which cracks heavy armor, I don't think we need the Assault Hacker as badly. So what that's done is it's got us to 301 points. I think that we can just sneak this list under if we were to free up a point somewhere, and I think I'm going to do that by taking this Unidron here and removing him. So instead of being a Forward Observer, he's just going to be a normal Unidron. And the reason why is that if the Unidron link team's moving out, well, the Nexus Special Operative is there to actually press buttons. And then if I lose him, then we've got the Nexus Hacker Lieutenant there. We've also got the Dr. Worm, and we've got the Malignos. So that's 4 specialists, which I think is just enough, considering that the Malignos especially is capable of actually surviving until he's ready to press buttons. So this list actually has 16 orders in it, which is a lot, especially considering the sheer amount of firepower it brings. You've got really powerful potential with Rambos, the Xeodron, and the Samaritan. You've got extremely good arrows, some of the best in the game with the Noctifer Missile Launcher and Hidden Deployment, and the Unidron Plasma Sniper. And then you've got obviously your Hacker in there. You've got a Nullifier which can go down, and then the Malignos is one of the best specialists in the game with, you know, Infiltration, TO Camo, Willpower 14. So this is my best Onyx list that I can think of. Since we're on a roll and we're having fun here, guys, I'm just going to quickly show you my Unidron list. Let's go to Unidrons. Let's say what happens if we just take 10 of these guys straight off the bat. Obviously, we're not going to keep all 10 in there. What happens if we also go to Nexus Operatives and take a Lieutenant Hacker plus a normal Hacker? So we've got that. We're gonna pad the list out with some specialists, some cheerleaders, because we're gonna need that. Two Xeodrons and an Ardrone, so we've got them in there. And then we're already up to 5 orders. We'll probably put the Imetrons in there as well. And then we can even afford the Q drones since there's so much packing going around, so we'll put in the HMG Q because there's going to be a lot of short range stuff. We're at 8 orders now, and then just for good measure, we're going to put in even more Unidrons. So we've got another 24 points to play with. We can start upgrading them. So one of them is going to come out and become a Spitfire. One of them is going to come out and become a Plasma Sniper. I'm going to take another one out and make one of them a combi rifle 10-bot deflector. Still got 7 points left. I think I can probably afford another Spitfire in there, so maybe let's put in another Spitfire. So that's 297, and we could put in I think another 3-pointer, so I'll take out 1, 2, 3 Unidrons and turn 3 of them into specialists, because we're probably going to need specialists at some point. Now we're up to 300 points with 6 special weapons. Now it's just a matter of grouping them. So one of the groups is going to have one Nexus hacker, and the other group's going to have the other Nexus hacker. So where's another? Here he is here. We're going to divvy up the forward observers, so we're going to put 2 in one and 1 in the other. We're going to give the secondary group a couple of Unidrons, the basic ones. We're going to have 1 Spitfire in each group, and one group can have the Plasma Sniper, the other group can have the combi rifle, and then we're just going to share around the orders a little bit. The Xeodrons are going to go back to balance it out. That's 8. We'll put the Xeodron in group 1, why not, and the Ardrone can go in group 1. So what you're looking at here, guys, is a pretty extreme list where, let's pretend you got the first turn. Your opponent maybe has a measly ARO watching the table like a War Core or a TR bot. First thing you do is remove that with enhanced fire on your Plasma Sniper rifle and just blast them to death. If you get crit, that's fine. You've got another wound to go on with Dogged. If you've cleared the arrows, or if you're ready to just attack, you start rolling across the battlefield with your group of Unidrons with 1 Nexus, and you use your Spitfire to kill anything which is sticking out at that mid-range. But once you get to their side of the table, you're shooting at point blank with assisted fire to ignore cover, the Plasma Carbine to use those shotgun blasts with the BTS rolls, and then after you finish with that group, you just leave them hanging around their deployment zone, ready to shoot back at Ballistical 14 and 2 burst. But then you move the other group in on the other side of the table and do the same thing. Now, if they have any models left after their first turn, they have to deal with, you know, 1 link team plus a whole bunch of really dogged Unidrons. So that can be annoying. You've got to spend the control command token to move the control group. This list can have a bit of trouble with hacking, but the thing is, you've got that that deflector, you've got nullifiers to go down in places where they've got hackers available. This list isn't great against a lot of terrain you've got to traverse, so that's not wonderful either. And also, it's not great at going second if the table doesn't allow you a lot of places for total cover when they can't go prone. So there are a couple of downsides to this list, but if you've got enough Unidrons, try it out, because this is actually quite hilariously powerful. And on some tables, against a lot of opponents, this can actually be quite viable. Last couple of things to say before we finish off. You can build lists which have 2 Noctifiers, so you can have the 2 missile launchers in hidden deployment. Try that sometimes. Before you go crazy about that, don't forget the Shazvasti can take 3. I might be doing a Shazvasti video soon about that, but Combined Army Vanilla can only take 1 hidden missile launcher. These guys can take 2, so that can be incredible in terms of AROs on a big wide table. We'll quickly have a look at the Sphinx list, because I think that we should. The Sphinx, let's have a quick go at that. So we chuck the Sphinx in there. We've lost 1/3 of our army points already, but we're of course going to go for the Unidron link team. We're going to chuck in the Plasma Sniper. We're going to chuck in the like 1 specialist, a couple of basic plebs. We'll put in the Nexus Lieutenant Hacker in that same group. We'll put in the Xeodron batroids, of course. We're going to need a cheap Ardrone, of course. We've got 9 orders there. Dr. Worm can be handy, especially if your Sphinx lives to see another day and you can go and repair him, so I think that's probably worth including. I'm going to take a Malignos just because this list won't be very good at achieving objectives otherwise, so I think that's quite important. We're going to shift the Malignos into group, no, we're going to leave it in group 2. We've got the Imetrons going down there as well, and we've just got only 10 points left. I'm not really sure I'm going to get the points from to actually make this work, to be honest. This actually isn't too bad. We could even put the Xeodron in Group 2 and the Malignos in Group 1 and just deploy it as a camo marker if you want to have that extra order generated for the Sphinx to do a Rambo with. But with this sort of setup, I think what we're probably doing is just upgrading something already existing in this list. And as you can see, it does defend well enough with that Plasma Sniper, and what you're wanting to be doing though is once you get a turn with the Sphinx, you need to inflict some damage with it. If you can't inflict enough damage, the rest of the list doesn't handle as well. Having said that though, if you move it out, you kill 5 or 6 things with it, then they counterattack and kill it. Well, because you've got that Malignos and the Link team there, I think you'll probably overpower them in the long run, which is why this can be quite a scary list. And hey, if they don't kill the Sphinx, then they're in a lot of trouble. I also like to play variations of that Samaritan list that I talked to you about, but with an Overdron in there as well, because if you compare them, the Overdron heavy rocket launcher is 57 compared to the Samaritan, which is at 40. So what you can do is actually merge the Noctifer and the Samaritan into an Overdron, and that can be a better list in terms of not having to rely on shenanigans and hidden and covert information. If you want that stability of the Overdron, that longevity and the firepower, that can be a better list, so I do recommend that as well. Man, I'm feeling a bit tired, feeling a bit knackered, so hopefully you guys watched all of this. Really enjoying Onyx at the moment. I don't think they are quite as good as Vanilla combined, but they're very powerful, and what makes them powerful is the accessibility of that Unidron link, which you can achieve so much with, and the additional availability of the Noctifiers can be very useful as well. The ability for Nexus operative to join a link team, there's additional availability for them as well. Some people like the Rodoks. I mean, I guess I could spend time making a little list using them, but I don't think I will bother. But what can I say? If you are dedicated to this faction, buy yourself a heavy weapons box for the Unidrons and go nuts. This has been Vol, guys. Thanks for watching.